All right, hello and welcome back. So I'm going to show you how to set up ThinLinc and use it to get into an Ubuntu desktop instance. This is going to be an Amazon EC2 instance running Ubuntu desktop. It'll be Ubuntu 24. And we're going to do this without a GPU. You can actually see I've already done this once already. I've got an instance here that I terminated. I was just testing everything out and making sure it would work before I went ahead and did the final recording. So ignore that one. We're going to create a new one to take the place of that instance. So in a second here, I'll click on launch instances and then we'll go ahead and start getting that set up. Okay, so the very first thing that I need to do is click on launch instances and give the instance a name. So you'll see up here at the top, I can tag the instance with a name. I'm going to go for ThinLinc, just something that's easy to remember. And I have a Lambda function set up that's going to create an A record that maps to this name in Route 53. So I'm going to end up with a Route 53 A record that points to thinlink.jeremypeterson.com. You don't have to do that. That's just something I like to do. It makes it easier for me to find these machines and not have to remember IP addresses. I haven't actually done a video on how I set that all up, how I created those Lambda functions. Maybe I'll do that in a future video. One other thing here, you can see I've chosen my architecture as x86. In a lot of my videos, when I set up a Linux machine, I will choose ARM. This time I'm not doing that because later on in a future video that I haven't posted yet, I'm actually going to be setting up Android Studio, and Android Studio expects, at least in Linux, to be running on the x86 architecture. So that's the reason for that choice. I'm going to use this ThinLinc setup later on to do something else to run Android Studio, and so I need to choose the correct architecture, which again is x86 here. And you can see I've picked a name, I've chosen Ubuntu 24. We can now finally move on to setting the instance type, and for now I'm going to go with just one of these T-type instances, one of these burstable instances. We'll go with a T3.x large, which should be plenty big for what we're doing. I need to assign an SSH key in case I want to log into the instance over SSH. If you don't already have a key, you'll have to go create one. I do have a key, so I'm just using my existing key here. Once we've done that part of the setup, we can then move on to network setup. And there are three mission critical things we have to do here. We have to select a public subnet. We need to assign at minimum an IPv4 public IP. I'm going to assign IPv4 and IPv6. And I need to choose an appropriate security group. I happen to already have one called default that has port 22 open among other ports. Port 22 is the only port that I absolutely have to have open in order to use ThinLinc. So you've got to make sure you have a security group that opens port 22 to the public internet if you're going to use ThinLinc. Okay, so now I need to choose an appropriate disk config. I'm going to go for a GP3 disk, 128 gigs, because Android Studio is big, so I need lots of space. I'm going to expand out the advanced view here, and I'm going to make sure that I encrypt my disk with a KMS key. Again, this is optional, but I like to keep all of my disks encrypted, just force of habit, so I always do that. One very last thing we need to do is open up the advanced details down here and choose an appropriate IAM instance profile. And this is going to give our instance permission to use other Amazon services, to talk to other Amazon services. That's what these IAM instance profiles do. In my case, what I've just done by selecting that profile and launching the instance is telling the EC2 service, hey, this instance should be given permission to talk to Systems Manager, which means I'll be able to use the built-in Systems Manager tool in order to connect to this instance once it boots up. Of course, you can see it's still in the pending state, so now I need to wait a little bit before I can actually connect. So what we'll do is we'll fast forward, if you will, to the point in time where thinlink.jeremypeterson.com is up and running. So let's do that. Okay, great. If I now go into the upper right-hand corner there and click on that Connect button, that will take me over to the Systems Manager Session Manager Connect page. And you see this button here? Once that turns orange and I can click on it like I've just done, that means the instance is actually booted all the way up and the Systems Manager agent is running on the instance, and I'll be able to log into a remote shell through my browser, which is very nice. It means I don't have to use my local terminal window or local SSH client to connect, but you'll see I am connected as SSM user. That's not what I want. This is an Ubuntu machine. The user I should be using to set everything up is, of course, Ubuntu. So we're going to have to use sudo and then su for switch user to switch over to the Ubuntu user. So let's do that. Awesome, so here we go, sudo su ubuntu, hit enter, and that'll drop me into An Ubuntu user session, great. But you'll see I'm still in this sort of temporary directory that this SSM agent user uses. That's just where you get dropped by default when you connect this way. I'm going to have to type in cd to go to the Ubuntu user's home directory. If you type cd change directory with no arguments after it, of course you are taken back to whatever your default directory is, which for me is going to be the Ubuntu home directory because I'm now logged in as the Ubuntu user. I'm sure you knew all that already though. Sorry, I'm never sure how much background I should give when I explain commands in the shell. All right, anyway, you can see there's nothing there now. Home Ubuntu is empty. This is exactly what we expect on Ubuntu server. Once I've finished installing a display manager and GNOME and all the Ubuntu desktop packages, this home directory will have all the normal stuff in it that you expect in desktop Ubuntu. But to get to that point, we need to do apt-get update, which is what I'm doing right now. And then, of course, immediately after that, we have to run apt-get upgrade. And once upgrade has run to completion, I'll make sure that I'm not missing anything important. And as long as everything is installed and ready to go, then I can start installing the Ubuntu desktop packages. Note that if I need to do a kernel upgrade during this process, I'm going to have to reboot as well. And in fact, during this process, there will probably be several times when we need to reboot. And there you have it. Speak of the devil, we did indeed just build a new kernel and install it. So we are going to have to reboot before we do any of the other steps in our setup. Always a good idea to run an apt update and an apt upgrade in a fresh Ubuntu install just to make sure you're all the way up to date. And you can see I've done sudo reboot and it's actually killed my systems manager, session manager console here. I can't type anymore. It shows up as terminated or killed in the bottom there. If I click the terminate button, it closes the tab for me, takes me back to the EC2 instance status homepage, and I'm just going to hang out here for a couple of minutes until the instance reboots and I can connect back in. Great, so we've waited about a minute here. I'm going to click connect and let's see. All right, the connect button is orange. That's a good sign. I should be able to then click on that and jump into the sessions manager shell, switch over to the Ubuntu user, and then see how everything went. At this point, we'll hopefully be able to start installing the Ubuntu desktop meta package, which pulls in all the desktop stuff, and also the GDM3 package, which is going to be our display manager. Okay, so we'll do apt-get update one more time, make sure that all works, looks good, and then we'll do get upgrade again just one more time just to make sure we didn't miss anything. Now we can actually start with the real installs. So we're finally at the point where we can really get started. We're going to do apt-get -y, which will auto-accept any prompts that come up asking if we want to install things. That way I don't have to sit here and type yes. Okay, so we'll do -y install. Oops, sorry. Let's try that again. Sudo apt-get -y install. There we go. And we will do Ubuntu Desktop and GDM3. I think Ubuntu Desktop might include GDM3, but I like to throw it on there just in case. And now we can just sort of fast forward to the point where all this is installed. All right, and we're done. We do have a couple housekeeping chores to do though before we install anything else. First of all, I want to make sure GDM3 is now set as our display manager. So I need to use the cat command to double check the contents of a specific file in order to do that. So what I'm going to type in here, hold on, let me think about this for a second. I always forget this one. I think it's cat etc x11 and then a default display manager. Yes, and it's set to user sbin GDM3, which is correct. Now we also need to go in and change some GDM settings. So I'm going to open up Vim, my favorite text editor, and we're going to edit one of these GDM config files to turn off Wayland. I won't go into too many specifics in this video, but basically Wayland is a replacement for traditional X11, and we need to turn it off because a lot of these remote desktop tools do not play nice with Wayland. Certain other pieces of desktop software that have pre-Wayland dependencies also don't play nice with Wayland, so we just need to turn it off. I explained the same process in a previous video about Amazon DCV, which is another remote desktop viewing tool. Same deal. That tool also doesn't like Wayland to be on. Okay, enough background. Sudo vim /etc/gdm3 custom.conf, and you'll see there's a line here to disable Wayland. You have to uncomment this. We have to say Wayland enable equals false. We have to comment that in so it turns white. And then, of course, I quit Vim with :WQ and enter. then once we've saved that change, we're going to have to reboot GDM3 to make sure that the change took effect. So we'll do that next. Okay, :WQ, you can see in the lower left, I've typed that in. Now I just need to hit enter. Great, back at the shell. Now I'm going to use systemctl to restart GDM3. So we need to make sure that it gets restarted for this change to take effect. So I type sudo systemctl restart and then the name of the service, GDM3, and I hit enter, and now it is restarted. I also want to make sure that we're going to boot up to the desktop when the machine restarts next time. So I'm going to type systemctl get default, and you can see the target is graphical.target. That's good. That means we will in fact boot up to the desktop next time the machine boots. And just to make sure that's absolutely true, let's go ahead and reboot. So again, we'll run sudo reboot, we'll let the machine reboot, and we'll fast forward back to the point in time when we can reconnect. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've killed our sessions manager session here. We'll go back to the EC2 console and we'll wait. All right, so we've waited a minute or two. I'll click connect. Looks like our button is orange. We click the orange connect button. Once again, we open a new tab. We end up back in systems manager, session manager. We switch over to the Ubuntu user. And now we can get to the real deal. So we've got a running desktop environment. Now it's just a matter of installing ThinLinc and actually getting connected to the machine. And of course, we'll have to fiddle around with some config files per usual, but no big deal. All of them are easy to edit. ThinLinc is actually very easy to set up. So let's get to it. I'm going to cheat a little bit and just paste in the wget command that will actually fetch the ThinLinc server package. I will put this in the description under the video so that you have a copy of it if you need. What you really should do, though, is go to the downloads page on the ThinLinc website and make sure you're getting the latest copy. If you take a look at my link, it's got the version in it. That is obviously going to change over time, so you're better off making sure you fetch the right download at the time that you're watching the video. Might be an updated version by then. And you'll see I'm unzipping this package. I'm expanding it. Now I'm going to go into the new server directory here. And there is an installer script that you can run with sh and then /install, I think it is. Let me make sure I get that right. Yeah, it's sh and then /install server. And I forgot sudo, so it's going to ask me if I want to switch to privileged mode. Actually, yes, I do. I do want to install this with sudo. I forgot. So let me say yes. And then you'll notice there's a bunch of prompts. This thing is going to ask you repeatedly whether or not you want to install particular things. I'm going to recommend that you just say yes to everything. So starting from this first prompt, we're going to type in yes. And then for all the prompts that come up after this, same deal, we're going to go with yes. And I've typed yes. And of course, it's going to say, hey, are you sure? Do you want to install? Press enter to continue. For whatever reason, this is how the ThinLinc installer is set up. So I'm actually going to cut forward to when the install is complete, because the next 5 minutes are just me typing yes and then hitting enter and then typing yes and then hitting enter. Not that exciting, so I'm going to skip through it. Basically, again, what I did was I just said yes to everything, but as you go through yourself, make sure you read the dialogues and you can make your own decisions about what you want to install and what you don't want to install. Okay, and here I am hitting enter for the last time, and we do actually, if you read the last message carefully, I need to run this sudo vsudo command here because I need to update my sudo settings so that the ThinLinc administrative commands are actually on the sudo path so that I can run them as the administrator. So I'm going to hit enter in just a second here. Again, that command, you can see it at the bottom, is sudo and then vi sudo. That's going to open up this config file that has all the paths for the sudo command. And you'll see there's this secure path here, which basically specifies which directories to look in for commands that can be run via sudo. And the path to the ThinLinc commands is not on there. So what we then need to do is actually add the two paths that ThinLinc uses for executables to the end of this secure path parameter. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm actually just going to paste them in. I have a blog post that covers what they are. I'll link to that in the description, but you can see I've pasted them onto the end here. I've got opt ThinLinc bin and opt ThinLinc s bin. Those are now on the path. I will quit with Control X and then yes and enter. And now we are ready to go. So again, if I go back in, sudo vsudo, you'll see the path did update successfully. That stuff that I just added is still there. We're not quite done with setting up ThinLinc, however. There is one configuration file that we need to change. Because we're running on an EC2 instance, when ThinLinc starts up, it's going to try to listen on the local private IP address in the VPC where the EC2 instance is deployed. We don't want it to do that. We actually want it to listen, in our case, for connections from the internet. So we need to adjust the behavior of ThinLinc a little bit by updating that config file. So again, I'm being a little lazy here. I've pasted in a one-liner from my blog post, which again, I've linked to in the description. And you'll see there's this agent hostname field in there, and I'm replacing that with thinlink.jeremypeterson.com, which is the hostname that I set up. If you don't have a hostname, no big deal. You'd replace that with your public IP address. I just happen to have an A record that points to my machine, so I can throw the actual hostname right in there. Okay, so this is a one-liner. As soon as I hit enter to execute this, it'll just run and do the replacement. You can actually plug in the icanhasip.com URL in there instead and have that, drop in a replacement for your IP address. If you don't know what it is, that's an easy way to go. The command to do that is also in the blog post. So if you want a version of the command that will figure out your IP for you, I've got one in the blog post. So just be aware of that. All right, so we've now run that. And if I do cat and I run it on that config file and I grep around for agent hostname, then I should be able to see that updated. Ooh, sorry, this is kind of a long file. Let me go back and do that again, but grepping for agent hostname because I'm not seeing it in here. So again, this config file is a little long, so let's grep for the line we're interested in. There it is. Okay, so you can see it did update successfully. That hostname is now set. We are now pretty much done. So we're going to restart. This is the name of the ThinLinc service, this vsmagent.service. We've restarted that now. We should be pretty much good to go at this point. All right, so just to be absolutely sure it's working, we'll do systemctl status and then the name of the service, and you'll see it looks like it's running okay, so no big problems there. I will then reboot just for good measure, and we'll switch over to another screen and actually try out the ThinLinc client on my local machine, try and get it to connect up. Of course, again, I'm going to want to wait until I know the machine has booted up all the way. Okay, so I have waited a couple minutes here, so the machine should be good to go, and you'll see I've dragged the ThinLinc client into my applications folder here on my Mac. Obviously, macOS is picky about installing stuff from the internet, so I need to right-click on it from the applications folder, then left-click on Open. It's going to warn me that this is an application downloaded from the internet and not the Apple App Store. That's fine. I actually really do want to run this. I trust this piece of software, so right-click, Open. Again, it's going to warn me the first time I open it, and maybe also run a verification. Once that's done, the client will fire right up. Oh, actually, that was easier than I thought it. It ran right away. Fantastic. All right, so you can see I've plugged in the server name, which is the host name associated with my instance. My username is Ubuntu, and I've had to plug in an SSH key. That is the way that ThinLinc likes to authenticate. I'm using that SSH key that we picked when we created the instance. I've downloaded a copy of that SSH key to my downloads folder, and I've plugged it in here in the key field. If we look at the options, most of the defaults are fine. I haven't turned on drive or printer forwarding. You can. I don't need them, so I left them off. I've left most of the other options here at defaults. I haven't made any major changes. I've just made sure that under local devices, sound is turned on. We can hit OK, and now we're pretty much ready to go. So we can go ahead. Actually, you know what? Hold on, let me make sure that looks okay. Yep, okay. So we can now go ahead and click connect. It's going to warn me this is the first time I'm connecting, so it's got a complaint about the SSH key signature. I'm just going to hit continue. I know the key is right, and I know this is really the server I want to connect to, so this is safe. I can just hit the connect button there, and in just a moment it will pop up the ThinLinc session chooser. There's like a little application built into ThinLinc that will let me choose which remote session I want to connect to. This machine only has a single user, which is Ubuntu, so there's nothing is going to show up here. I just hit start, and that will automatically start a session as the Ubuntu user and pop me into the Ubuntu desktop if everything is working. And it is. So you can see here I am. I'm in the Welcome to Ubuntu dialog, and I now have a snappy, fast, fully featured Linux remote desktop, Ubuntu 24, on an EC2 instance, accessible through the ThinLinc client from anywhere in the world. Pretty sweet, right? And you can see the speed is pretty okay. I mean, this is not bad at all considering that I actually live in Beijing and this machine is somewhere on the west coast of the United States, so it's on the other side of the planet, but still pretty speedy. And you just saw me use all of the log out and disconnect options from inside the Ubuntu desktop. When I logged out, it killed my session. If I reconnect, I'll end up back on the Ubuntu desktop just to prove that that's all working. I just want to show you that again, just to show you that it's really working. Again, I have to hit start to actually start the session. Again, it should just drop me back onto the desktop, and that'll be the proof that everything worked the way it's supposed to work. So let's take a look at that. It's a little slow. Let me forward to the point where we're actually connected here. And there you have it, proof positive. We can connect, we can disconnect, we can reconnect, and we always end up back on the desktop. One last note though, see Firefox up here? In Ubuntu 24, Firefox is installed as a snap package, and snap packages are sandboxed. When I tested Firefox with ThinLinc, I did not get any audio. Audio from Firefox, for whatever reason, did not get forwarded to my local computer. I don't know if this is like an all the time issue, or maybe it was just, network latency, because this desktop is on the opposite side of the planet from me. It's on the West Coast. I'm in China. So, it's in America. I'm in China, other side of the planet. Anyway, to get around the issue I had with Firefox, what I did was I installed Chrome. So just be aware, might be a good idea to have another browser installed that is not installed as a snap package if you have issues with audio in Firefox. All right, with that final note out of the way, that's all for today's video, and I will see you in the next one.